In our final video covering the Emperor's battle to unite Terra, we cover Albia, who proved strong opposition to the Big East forces, and Acad, who faced the First Legion of the Emperors, the Dark Angels. See how the early deployments shaped their character. Now, let's begin. The Death Guard, who were better known at this time as the Dusk Raiders, recruited heavily from the warlike clans of Old Albia. The recruitment of the Sons of Albia served two purposes for the newborn Imperium. Firstly, and most importantly, it drew off the cream of whole generations of strength from a Terran realm, now friend and ally but never fully trusted. For Albia, towering amid the North Atlant wilderness, had once been not only a feared enemy whose legend stalked the age of strife, but once was also a true rival for control of the destiny of mankind. By taking its brightest and best into the legions and the other growing imperial organisations marked for war amid the stars, the Emperor ensured they could never threaten unification from within. Secondly, it subsumed into the Emperor's forces all the martial traditions and bloodlines that had for centuries held much of Terra under their cruel grasp and eventually overcome the Pan-Pacific Empire under the rule of the unspeakable king. Such a breed of relentless warlords and soldier scientists was a valuable resource that the Emperor was loath to waste. The warlord clans of Old Albia did not readily bend the knee to the Emperor. However, having by then finally thrown off the tyranny of the last descendants of the unspeakable king, they refused to have another master in that person's place. Instead, the Albians met the Thunder Warrior regiments with their own battalions of steam-belching proto-dreadnoughts and armoured Ironside soldiers. In battle after battle, the forces of unification were held in check, although at a shattering cost for the Albians, who would not give in despite the onslaught. Admiring the martial temper and courage of the foe, the Emperor called a ceasefire and sought victory over the warlord clans by negotiation, knowing that to crush them by force alone would entail a grinding bloodbath that would only serve to decimate his own forces and gain him nothing but a handful of ashes as a prize of war. Thus it was that despite the contra-advice of his human counsellors and generals, for whom the warriors of Old Albia had held an almost superstitious fear born of generations, the Emperor pursued peace. Going before them, it is said, unarmed and clothed in white and crimson, the Emperor spoke to the warlords' parliament and laid before them his vision of a future mankind, reunited and descendant, of tyrants toppled and nightmares slain. He offered them glory among the stars, and most importantly, redemption for many hundreds of years of kinslaying and bloodshed. The warlords of Old Albia, to the shock of many, accepted. In doing so, the Albian clans became among the unification's most zealous supporters, although still untrusted by many, lending them warriors and war machines to the Emperor's cause. And also in addition, secrets long kept were offered up to the Emperor's eyes alone. Most importantly, for the future of humanity, they sacrificed their sons to become the Space Marines, who I mentioned later became known as the Death Guard. As with all the Legiones Astartes, the First Legion was intended as a replacement for the Thunder Warrior Brigades, that unstable experiment which by the mid-years of the Unification Wars had run its course. The Thunder Warrior regiments had been the tool needed for their time, as unrefined and savage a weapon as could be needed to match the grim tyrants and debauched warlords of ancient Terra. Yet in comparison to the Astartes, they were a rough breed, powerful to be sure, perhaps even individually more so than their new kin, but unable to quell their fury, to work in unison. They were a mob, a storm of fury and blades that rolled over its foes, whilst the Astartes were a true army and in their unity could withstand any onslaught. The First Legion would demonstrate the potential within them, for they were a true legion numbering nearly 10,000, whilst their kin were but a few hundred each, and they would be fielded at Samarkand and face 200,000 gene-forged Udug Hull, the elite slave soldiers of the King of Acad. The Udug Hull, whose blood was poison and whose strength was greater than 10 unenhanced warriors were the terror of the upper Asiatic basin, and a foe that had so far resisted the advance of the Emperor's armies. So far. 10 hours after battle was joined, Samarkand was in ruins, the Udug hull scattered and broken, and the great king of Akkad's head, a trophy on the belt of the newly appointed Grand Master of the First Legion. This warrior, Hector Thrain, was lauded by the princes of Terra for his victory and granted the title Sinistra of the Emperor, the left hand of the warlord of Terra, his most fearsome instrument of conquest. By order of the Emperor, the First Legion left no stone upon stone, and almost every record of the terrors encountered in that battle was destroyed. In the wake of the victory, the rate of recruitment and processing of the new legions was accelerated, their potential proven in triumph, and the First Legion gained a dark renown among the ranks of the armies of Unity. They had walked into the mouth of hell, and not only had they returned, but they had left hell, that place behind them, shattered in their passage. This first victory was to set the pattern of the First Legion's battles during the Battle for Old Earth and the Sol System, pitting them against the most horrific of foes, with only one objective: to eradicate them utterly, completely. From Fortress 31 in the Thulian wastes of ancient Terra to the Battle of Carnarchon amid the cryovolcanic mountains of Sedna, the First Legion would meet the worst threats that faced the armies of Unity and lay them low. So horrific were many of the threats they faced, Xenos terrors beyond the pale of sanity, and psychic phenomena that threatened to tear reality asunder, that little more than the battle honours remain as evidence of what happened. The details are erased even from the data stacks of the Emperor's library. To prosecute these impossible battles, the Emperor would grant them access to the armoury vaults of the Imperial Palace, to every forbidden weapon entombed within, and they would be the only legion trusted to wield the worst of mankind's creations freely. The orders of Grandmaster Hector Thrain would see the obliteration of the warped cities of Cadon and Molle in the eastern reaches of ancient Terra, and the deployment of gene-phage munitions to purge, clean, a crave infestation also on Terra. These were victories that left an indelible stain on both the course of the war and the identity of the warriors who prosecuted them, forging Thrain's reputation as a ruthless and prideful warlord. Among the armies of Unification, the First Legion had become synonymous with death, for where they walked it seemed the Pale Rider followed. This had inevitably spawned many long-held superstitions regarding the reclusive warriors of the First. They were treated with an awe that sat somewhere between respect and terror by those who served alongside them, for it was said that to offend them was to bring the scrutiny of their patron, Death himself, upon the offender. Among the host gathered by the Emperor, they were not heroes, but rather a breed of monster made loyal by the will of their master. They were not to be lauded for their bravery, but rather placated to assuage their wrath. Despite the dictates of the imperial truth, the common soldiery of the imperial armies often set small wards and charms at the edges of their camps when the First Legion arrived to avert the ill luck that many felt followed the Emperor's firstborn legion. Such superstition was not without cause, for of those imperial formations attached to support the First Legion in combat, most came to bloody ends. Some were savaged by the monsters that the newly dubbed Angels of Death had come to slay, and others would simply vanish, purported to have been silenced by the First Legion themselves, lest word of some dread enemy returned to the camps. The warriors of the First Legion, ever of pragmatic mind, soon began to assume the guise in which they had been cast, adopting the skeletal icon of death as their own and adorning their armour with funerary symbols. This self-imposed exile from the camaraderie of the Emperor's lesser servants was a point of pride amongst the First Legion. It was a sacrifice made to protect the mortal army from the terrors only the First Legion were fit to bear, though to some of those they fought beside, most especially the other Astartes, it seems more vainglory and arrogance than humble sacrifice. The masters of the First showed no interest in such slights, content to remain wreathed in malign rumour as they fought the battles that could never be lauded lest they break the minds of those who bore witness to the battle honours. For while the younger legions were granted the lesser honour of standing triumphant at the mundane victories of conquest, the first will be awarded the greater honour of acting as the Emperor's left hand, a brutal efficiency, a weapon of grim aspect, hidden behind the bright pageantry of the Imperial Army. Let me know your thoughts on this part of the Unification Wars with a comment below, and if you like this 40k video I did, why not try this one?